So this is the next video in my Winter Squall series. And this one I'm going to be looking at the subject of near-death experiences, which I think a lot of people find fascinating. Now, most of my videos, these teaching lessons and these series that I'm doing recently are shorter in nature, 15, 20 minutes. This one's going to be a little bit longer because the interview that I'm going to be presenting to you in a few minutes is a little bit longer than most of the ones that I've been sharing. So let me just pause and we'll get started with the. So let's take a look at this particular subject. So the fact is really that throughout the world that people have experienced what are called or what we have come to know as near-death experiences. They have had some kind of a medical emergency or an accident or whatever, and it results in them being clinically dead. And while they're in that condition, their body at least is in that condition of all but expired. They have these experiences that they describe after being revived and regaining consciousness, and they are indeed fascinating. The accounts they give, and the interesting thing is that some of them are positive and some of them are negative, are obviously controversial, but as I said, they're fascinating. Some of the more positive ones are going towards the light, and obviously the interview you're going to hear in a few minutes, he talks about some of the more positive experiences, but there are negative ones as well. And the more that you look into the subject, you will see that there are both positive and negative. But either way, they are life-changing events for these people. So let me just pause and we'll watch the interview.
1,500 people with near-death experiences.
I started out as an agnostic. It was kind of the beginning of my journey to faith in Christ.
What happens when these people die?
The consistent commonalities would be that they leave their body and they're usually up above their body watching what's going on in the room. And this is what started to convince me as a skeptical engineer. When they are resuscitated, they can report on things that happened in the room while they had no brainwaves.
Wow.
So where are these memories being stored? I believe that the tunnel and the angels are there for protection. The spiritual realm is real and it's all around us. When we initially leave our bodies into the spiritual realm around us, it's the realm of a war.
So, John, my first question for you. You have interviewed more than 1,500 people with near-death experiences throughout about 35 years. So how did you even get into that and start down this path?
Yeah, either interviewed or studied, but I started out as an agnostic. So it was kind of the beginning of my journey to faith in Christ. I grew up very curious. I ended up studying engineering. My mind just works that way. I want to know why and how do you know? And I had come to the conclusion that Jesus was probably just a good man turned into a legend. God, you just can't know. There's no evidence. And so I was kind of going my own way when my dad was dying of cancer. And someone gave him the very first research that coined the term near-death experience. So we're talking about, I actually don't like the term near-death experience because the people I study are not nearly dead. They're dead. They're clinically dead. Yeah. No heartbeat, no brain waves. And yet either modern medicine or many times it's just miracle because we're talking sometimes minutes, sometimes hours, and they're resuscitated. They're brought back. And this book was on my dad's bedside table, the one that coined the term near-death experience. I pick it up and I start reading it because my father's dying. And I was blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, this might be the evidence I've been demanding, and so many of them talked about how they were more alive than they've ever felt in a place more real than this has ever felt. And many times in the presence of this God of light who was love and personal, knew them intimately. Many of them saw Jesus and associated Jesus with this God of light. And I was blown away. I read the whole thing in one night and I said, okay, maybe I need to be more open to the Bible. And so as a result, it was about a year later, a friend invited me into a small group Bible study, and I went and I started asking all my questions. And for very different reasons than near-death experiences, I came to faith in Christ.
And I think it's so interesting to hear you say that you don't like the term near-death experiences. One, because I would label you as one of the experts on NDEs. And two, I heard on your podcast, you pulled that clip from Joe Rogan when he was interviewing a skeptic. And he's, the
Dr.
man,
Michael Shermer.
Yeah. And he said, these people didn't actually die. And I think there are a lot of doctors and medical records that would show these people were flatlined. They were dead that had these experiences.
Oh, yeah. Dean Braxton, who I interviewed, has the medical records that he died of sepsis for an hour and 45 minutes. He had no heartbeat, no brainwave. Randy Kay was a CEO that I interviewed, and he interviews a lot of people now, but he was dead in the hospital 30 minutes. So Dr. Mary Neal, spine surgeon, she was pinned under a waterfall for 30 minutes. So these people were dead.
But what happens when a person dies and let's just start there. What happens when these people die?
So the consistent commonalities would be that they leave their body. And what's interesting is many people who I've interviewed, who, whatever the situation, it might be a tragic accident. Dr. Mary Neal was terrified of drowning. And yet in a kayaking accident, she gets pinned under a waterfall, but she calls out to God and says, Lord, your will be done. And sincerely, and immediately felt held by Jesus. And she was aware of what was going on, but she said, I felt more alive. I felt more wonderful than I ever have in my life. She didn't feel like she was dying. She felt like she was coming more alive. And I think that's an important point to make because, there are all kinds of ways that people go from this life into the next, but those who know the Lord and those who call on the Lord, he is there and he is with them. And he's not the God of the dead. He's the God of the living. And we become more alive, more conscious. But what many people say is they leave their body and they're usually up above their body watching what's going on in the room, or if they're resuscitation, Dr. Neal's watching up above on the river where they're trying to find her body. But people are often, like if they have a cardiac arrest or they're in the hospital, they are there in the room. And this is what started to convince me as a skeptical engineer that there's something to this. When they are resuscitated, they can report on things that happened in the room while they had no brain waves.
Wow.
So where are these memories being stored?
Yes.
How are they discerning this? Unless, like they said, the soul lives on beyond the body. And it's verifiable evidence. We can get more into that later, but they leave their body. They observe what's going on. They feel like they are still themselves. They have a body, but it's a spiritual body, just like Paul talked about.
Yeah.
And, Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 says our bodies are buried in a natural body, but they're raised a spiritual body. And he says they're buried in weakness, but they're raised in duname, is the Greek word from which we get dynamite, right? They're raised in power. And that's a common thing that near-death experiencers say is they felt really literally more alive because their eyesight was perfect, like telescopic. The communication is pure, thought to thought, heart to heart, no misunderstanding. Travel, they can move, sometimes gliding, but sometimes it's more like flying. Sometimes it's in a thought and they're there. So there are all these things that they're discovering, like not just having 5 senses, but they say more like 50 senses, more alive.
So they're in a spiritual body. They look like themselves, but they don't feel like themselves, correct? Like it's not the physical body that we are in right now. Is that right?
No, they feel so themselves that what's really interesting, Abigail, is how many of them, as they're telling me this story and they're getting to, somewhere along there, and I go, so do you know you're dead? And they'll pause and kind of, well, at this point, I'm kind of realizing maybe I am.
Yeah.
Because life goes on. And that's the biggest takeaway that I think people need to understand. Heaven is not discontinuous with this life. It's stepping into more life.
Mm-hmm. So are they enclosed?
Okay. Well, interestingly, so like this one bank president I interviewed, Marv Besteman, he was in a hospital in Michigan. He had surgery. There were complications afterwards. And he codes, his heart stops. And he said, these two guys walk up and he realized they were angels, but they just look like people. And they disconnect him and they take him and he's in a hospital gown, right? You know, those ones you don't want to go out in.
Not when you want to roll into heaven in.
Yeah. And they're usually, there's no zipper in the back. It's just wide open, right? And he said, and they start to go and they're flying. They're flying off, moving very rapidly. And he looks down and he notices he's in like his favorite golf outfit, like what he would normally wear. Yeah. Which I always say, how cool of God to dress us like we'd feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And interestingly, when he gets to the gates of heaven, he sees people from all over the world in what you would think they would wear in their own culture. And so, yes, we can look to each other just like we do now. We wear the things that we feel comfortable in, but not always. Because sometimes and many times and all around the world, they talk about these people with these robes of white. But what I figured out is so like Dr. Mary Neal was there by the river and she's up above and these people come and she said they are just exploding with light. That was love, like coming toward her. And it was this incredible reunion and joyous dancing and hugging. And, she said these were people I had known and they were her welcoming committee, which is another commonality.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit, you mentioned the two angels, but can you talk a little bit about the welcoming and the escort committee to heaven when people die?
Yeah. So sometimes there are angels there. Sometimes there are people that they've loved in life who are there to greet them. Many times I find when they're there right after they leave their body, they're there to tell them it's not your time yet. So it's like God has sent them to say, not yet, you got to go back. You have a purpose still. Because many, many times I find either what happens is after they observe their body, a portal or a tunnel opens up and they begin to go through it. Now, not always. Sometimes there are angels there and the angels are transporting them. But what's fascinating is I believe that the tunnel and the angels or the welcoming committee are there for protection. I think that's really important to understand because the spiritual realm is real and it's all around us. But as Jesus taught us, for a while, this realm of the spiritual is the realm of evil. God has given evil reign. And so when we initially leave our bodies into the spiritual realm around us, it's the realm of a war, of a spiritual battle.
Wow, yeah.
And people have seen that. So I've come to believe that these portals or these tunnels are actually protection. It's actually protecting them going through, in the Bible, it talks about the first, second, and third heaven. Paul talks about how he was taken to the third heaven. In a Hebrew mindset, the first heaven is just what we see, right? You look up in the heavens. The second is the spiritual dimensionality all around us. The third is the holy city of God, and where we would call it the intermediate heaven as well. So I believe that's what this escort or these tunnels or portals are for.
Yeah,
is actually to protect.
I've been evangelizing, telling people about heaven, warning them about hell, literally since I was a little girl. Just it was in my blood, it was in my family. Like that was just. Just recruit all your friends. Let's take all of our friends with us to heaven. But I had to come to terms a couple years ago when I was in seminary with the fact that I've actually been a little afraid of heaven. I had never lost anyone super close to me until a couple years ago. And it has been just a few years of boom, boom, boom. I had all of my grandparents lived into their 90s.
Wow.
And, I lost all of them in a very short amount of time. And then shortly after that, my husband's dad passed away 5 days after he was diagnosed with cancer. He was just 57 years old. And then my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and we lost her in just 3 months. And it has just been this crazy whirlwind of just so much loss in a very condensed period of time. And during that time, I was in seminary, and we had to do a unit or just a in-depth study of heaven. And I realized how little I really know about it, and how I know it's always been a place I've wanted to go, but I've been afraid of going there because, one, it means I'm dead. And two, I love my husband so much, and everything I've heard about heaven is that we won't be married, and I don't want there to ever be a time.
So, Kathy and I've been interested in this for a long time because my dad died, and I was pretty young, and it did force me to grapple with the same thing.
Yes.
And you've already heard my story, but what was funny is, when we were in our late 20s and stuff, Kathy would hear me talking about, Kathy's my wife. She would hear me talking about this, and she'd kind of get bummed, and she's like, I don't want to think about that. And I'm like, why? And she's like, well, we won't be married in heaven. To which I say, well, that's good. That she said it that way. She could say, well, we won't be married in heaven. It's all in the tone, right?
And it makes
so
me
she was sad. And I think Jesus has been misunderstood about what that means, because we think that means that we will not have relationship as deep or as close in heaven. And I think that's absolutely false. I don't think that's what he meant at all. So if you read that passage closely, it's the Pharisees trying to trick him. It's a trap. They're setting a trap. And what he answers with is, you don't know the scriptures and you don't know the power of God, because they're trying to trap him, saying, okay, this woman's being married to 7 people. Who's she going to be married to? Jesus. Right? That's kind of how it's going. And his point is the power of God. What is missing in this life is the love of God. I mean, we get taste, but it's all being filtered down through broken humanity. And that's why when people stand in the presence of God, I mean, they don't have words. They say human love just doesn't compare.
Okay.
If you can take all of the love you've ever felt from a grandparent, a parent, for your kids, from your kids, for your spouse, put it all together in one, they say, you're going to have to multiply it by 1,000,000 of what it's like to stand in the presence of God and feel his personal, all-knowing love, unconditional for you. And the point is that when we are with him in his kingdom, we will have that relationship with God, but also all of our relationships go deeper. They don't get broken apart. Love is the whole point. And so why would God tear apart what he's trying to teach us about the most? And he's not going to. So when Jesus said there'll be no marrying or giving in marriage, he's talking about new unions. There aren't going to be new unions of marriage, because all the children and the families, all the procreation has happened. So we're not going to procreate. We'll be like the angels in that sense.
Okay.
They don't procreate. But that doesn't mean we won't be together. And so many near-death experiencers testify to that they saw their grandmother and grandfather together. They are living in homes together. Their homes in heaven. So they're neighborhoods in heaven. There's life. That's what people, I think, back to what you were saying, Colossians 3:1 tells us, set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. Why? Well, because you've died and your life is hidden in Christ in the heavenlies. We're told to imagine heaven. That's why I named the book that. We're told to, but we don't very well. And here's the problem. when we don't imagine heaven, when we can imagine retirement and golf and vacationing and shopping and, travel, and we can imagine that, we live for that. We plan for that. We save for that. But if we can't imagine heaven well, we're not going to live for it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the problem I see with so many Christians, non-Christians too, but even Christians. In Hebrews chapter 11, it's the faith hall of fame. It's the people of the Old Testament who were faithful to God, men and women of faith. And in the last part of that, it's Abraham and Sarah and Rahab and Moses and Elijah. It's all of them. But at the last part of that, it says they were not looking for an earthly city. They were looking for a heavenly city. And that's how they were able to live by faith. So when we don't work on imagining heaven well, when we don't meditate on the truths of what God has told us, then we end up living just for this life and we're cutting ourselves short, because that is real life. Relationships don't get torn apart. Jesus would not have said to his closest friends, John 14, his last night on earth, I'm going to prepare a place for you and I'll come and get you. And you'll always be with me where I am.
Now, this I ask kind of half jokingly. It comes from my son, but also with curiosity. Have any of the accounts of heaven are there dinosaurs in heaven?
I have not heard that.
But there are dogs and horses.
There are dogs. I mean, Karina saw her dogs. Randy saw his dogs. I mean, their dogs.
I'm a dog lover.
Horses.
That brings me so much joy.
Yeah, even cats, though I wasn't sure about cats. I'm not a cat lover. But no, our pets are there. Love remains. Mm-hmm. I love what Jesus said to one of them. Yes, I've given your children their pets to teach them to love. So why would he rip that away from us? He's not going to rip that away from us. And near-death experiencers testify that that's the case. However, I've had the same question about dinosaurs, and I have not heard that.
Okay, well, you have to keep me posted if you ever hear about it.
Well, but Dean Braxton and several others did talk about some of the creatures they saw there that are, we would think bizarre. Mm-hmm. You're not afraid of anything, but you might be on Earth if you saw me. He said, when I came back, I got enamored with those deep sea underwater creatures that
yes,
you see and you're like, what is that? And, I think, Abigail, we fail to realize the mind of God. My wife and I were just walking the mall here yesterday and going through botanical gardens. And I just thought, every variation of leaf and flower and beauty and creatures too. I mean, we've categorized 2 million species of creature, but we keep discovering so many, they think there are like 7 million that we haven't even discovered.
Wow.
This God is a mind and a creativity we can't even conceive of. So are there creatures beyond what we know of? Yeah. Might there be dinosaurs somewhere? Yeah, maybe. I just don't know. If I don't know, I don't say.
All right. Well, you've given me enough to report back to Daniel, so he will be I think he'll be at least excited about just the mystical, potentially scary things people have seen or would be scary on Earth.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for those of you who've been listening, we are going to do part 2 with John because he has way more insights to share with us. And while we have him here, we just want to take advantage of all of his knowledge on life after death. So next week, be sure to tune back in. We're going to bring part 2 of this episode where he shares what people who've had these near-death experiences and say that they have seen and experienced hell. So John, thank you so much for joining us, for being willing to sit through 2 episodes. Thank you.
So anyway, as far as what John Burke was talking about, certainly it's safe to say that these experiences offer no definitive proof of what the afterlife is like in and of themselves. They certainly offer us evidence but there's no definitive proof. And certainly skeptics, as was actually mentioned in the video, skeptics say that these people were not really dead, although certainly their own medical records indicate that they were clinically dead. No heartbeat, no brain waves, etc. Some say that these experiences are a delusion, maybe even a demonic one in some respects, that because these people weren't really dead, they were deluded in some way from a spiritual standpoint. It is safe to say, though, that these accounts can't be easily discounted from a natural standpoint. The fact that people uh, can recount, what was happening in the room or in the area, what people were doing, what people were saying. I've heard of instances where people had an out-of-body experience where they can describe the meal that their mother or wife was preparing miles away from where they were when the accident or the medical event occurred. And of course, there are many that can describe what was happening in the room where their lifeless body lay. And so there's in most of these, at least certainly many of them, there is no plausible, natural explanation as to how this could have occurred, how a dead person could recount what happened in the room. One thing that we can definitely say is that these people were extraordinarily affected and had their lives changed. Now, he was speaking exclusively in this video about the positive experiences, but there are those that have negative experiences, and those obviously are life-changing as well, just like these positive ones were. Um, so the bottom line is that the Bible assures us that there is life after death. And so the question for us here is, did these people get a foretaste or a glimpse of what that life after death is like? Certainly they got a glimpse and a hint and evidence that there is life after death. The question is what life after death looks like for each one of us. Certainly as a Christian, uh, I would say, and the Bible would say, that it's not the same for everybody. And what happens to you, whether you follow one path or the other, the path that leads to heaven or the path that leads to hell, is determined by what you answer, how you answer the question that Jesus posed to the Apostle Peter. And he said, "Who do you say that I am?" And of course, Peter answers, "You are the Christ, or the Messiah, the Son of the living God." In the end, we will each have to answer that question. And how we answer that question is determinative in terms of what path we end up on once this body expires. I hope this has been interesting, informative. Again, there are many, many, many more, either whether it's videos or books or whatever, that have been published that present many, many more of these instances of near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and so forth, which again provides us evidence that we are much more than these physical beings. God bless you for watching. Hopefully you'll watch or you'll look for my next video. Thank you.